Picture this: neon lights flickering over ocean waves, palm trees swaying in humid moonlight, limousines creeping up to doorways where velvet ropes guard entry into places where money flows as freely as vodka, and danger whispers behind every glass. It's Miami, the early 1990s, a city of excess, glitter, and secrets. Beneath the gloss, crime lords pulling strings, cocaine fortunes being made, alliances forged in darkness. What happens when luxury and lawlessness dance cheek to cheek on South Beach? In this video, we'll pull back the velvet curtain to reveal the hidden world of Miami's nightlife under the mob in the 90s. The glamour, the betrayals, the rise and fall, and the twisted ties between clubs, crime, law enforcement, and the people caught in between. Stay tuned. By the end, you'll know how the party ended and who paid the price. Miami Rising. The scene in 90s heat. The night air in Miami at the dawn of the 90s felt almost electric. Warm, salty, and alive, it carried the scent of the ocean, mixed with the promise of something exciting. Neon signs flickered like restless stars, and music pulsed from every open doorway along Collins Avenue. Travelers stepped off planes from New York, Los Angeles, and Europe, their suitcases packed with linen suits and ambitions. Everyone seemed to believe this city was the next big thing. And in many ways, they were right. In those early years of the decade, Miami was reinventing itself. The 80s had been turbulent, marked by crime waves and headlines about smuggling. But by the early 90s, a different image was taking shape. The Art Deco buildings of South Beach were being restored with pastel paint and bright awnings. Celebrities bought old hotels and turned them into boutique resorts. Photographers and designers arrived for fashion shoots, and film crews followed, giving the streets a cinematic glow. For a moment, it felt as if the city itself had decided to put on a sparkling new outfit. Money poured in from every direction. Foreign investors, especially from Europe and South America, snapped up properties. Trendy restaurants and cafes appeared almost overnight, offering everything from Cuban espresso to fusion sushi. Real estate values climbed. The skyline changed. Downtown and the beach areas became playgrounds for an eclectic mix of artists, entrepreneurs, and jet-set visitors. Miami felt both international and uniquely local, a place where you could hear Spanish, English, and Creole in a single conversation. Nightlife was at the heart of it all. After sunset, South Beach turned into a living stage. Limousines and bright convertibles lined Ocean Drive. Doors opened to velvet-roped clubs with hypnotic lighting and cutting-edge sound systems. Inside, dancers moved under swirling lasers, while DJs from Europe spun fresh house beats. Champagne flowed, and the dress code ranged from daring streetwear to sleek designer gowns. To party in Miami was to feel part of a glamorous secret. Yet beneath the champagne bubbles and camera flashes, deeper currents ran. The very factors that made Miami attractive, rapid growth, international cash flow, a reputation for indulgence, also made it fragile. City regulations struggled to keep up with the boom. Permits were rushed. Zoning laws bent under pressure. Enforcement was patchy, and sometimes palms were greased to speed things along. While most newcomers were simply chasing success, others saw easier, darker opportunities. Long-time residents noticed subtle changes. Some clubs stayed open well past legal hours, protected by quiet agreements. Lavish private parties took over waterfront mansions where entry lists were kept deliberately vague. Rumors spread of cash businesses that never quite balanced their books. No one could prove anything, but everyone had a story of a friend who saw something strange: an unmarked truck unloading crates at midnight, or a well-dressed visitor who always paid in thick envelopes of cash. For ordinary people, bartenders, dancers, hotel staff, it was a thrilling time. Tips were generous. Opportunities seemed endless. A single good season could pay off debts or fund a move to a bigger apartment. Many didn't want to ask too many questions. The city's glow was too tempting, and every weekend promised another unforgettable night. The early 90s also saw a cultural fusion unique to Miami. Cuban traditions blended with Caribbean rhythms and American pop trends. Fashion favored bright colors, linen fabrics, and gold accessories. Music was just as diverse. Salsa, hip-hop, electronic beats, and Latin pop all shared the air. Visitors compared Miami to a non-stop festival where boundaries between art, commerce, and celebration disappeared. But this very energy, the constant motion, the rush of money and people, created openings for those who thrived in gray areas. Criminal groups, from local gangs to international syndicates, watched the rising profits. Nightclubs offered more than dance floors. They were perfect for laundering cash, networking discreetly, and controlling valuable real estate. A booming, lightly regulated nightlife was like a neon invitation. City officials faced a delicate balance. They wanted Miami to shine as a tourist destination and global hub, yet they worried about the whispers of organized crime. Efforts to tighten rules sometimes met resistance from business owners who feared scaring away investment. Inspectors could be overwhelmed by the sheer pace of new openings. In a place that lived for the night, daylight regulations often lagged behind. Still, for most revelers, those concerns were distant. A Friday evening might start with a sunset drink on a rooftop and end at sunrise on a crowded dance floor. The city sold an intoxicating vision of pleasure and possibility. Whether you were a movie star, a college student, or a visiting DJ, Miami in the early 90s promised something unforgettable. And that promise set the stage for everything that followed. The glamour drew attention, the money drew ambition, and the cracks in oversight invited those willing to bend the rules. As the decade unfolded, the nightlife that symbolized Miami's rebirth would become the perfect arena for power plays, far from the public eye. From this vibrant, seductive beginning, the story naturally moves deeper into the world where vast sums of illicit cash and organized ambition started shaping the very pulse of the party. Next, we'll step behind the bright facades to explore the forces of cartels, hidden kings, and restless cash that fueled the city's most dangerous thrills. Cartels, kings, and cash. The beat of Miami's nightlife grew louder as the 90s moved on. But behind that rhythm pulsed something even stronger. The steady throb of untold fortunes, moving through secret channels. Picture a night when the ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and perfume, while somewhere inland, a quiet warehouse hummed with hidden activity. The contrast was striking. Brilliant neon on South Beach, and shadowy loading docks a few miles away. Both scenes were part of the same story. Miami had long been a natural gateway between North and South America, and that geography shaped its destiny. In the early 90s, powerful cartels from Colombia and other parts of Latin America recognized Miami as their ideal bridge. They weren't just moving substances. They were moving staggering amounts of cash. Those fortunes needed places to land and to blend in. The city's growing network of trendy clubs, new restaurants, and luxury condos provided perfect cover. Money laundering became an art form. Instead of suitcases stuffed with banknotes, think of clever accounting, overbooked VIP rooms, and seemingly endless renovations at certain clubs. A nightclub might report record-breaking bar sales that no one ever witnessed, or a sudden surge in private party bookings. On paper, it looked like success. In reality, it was a clever way to wash money clean. The same dance floors where DJs spun late-night sets doubled as financial laundromats for millions of dollars. But the cartels didn't just hide money, they shaped the scene. They brought an extravagant sense of style that matched Miami's taste for spectacle. Imported champagne, high-end European cars, and designer clothes weren't just indulgence. They were signals of power. Visitors might spot a fleet of gleaming white convertibles parked outside a club and never know that the owners were making international deals while everyone else danced. With so much at stake, these operations demanded careful management. Trusted middlemen, sometimes respected club promoters or apparently legitimate investors, acted as the bridge between the criminal networks and the nightlife economy. They arranged sponsorships, bought real estate under layers of shell companies, and kept the profits flowing. Some of these figures became local legends, known for generosity and lavish parties, yet few guessed how deep their connections ran. The influence extended well beyond the dance floor. Real estate agents, lawyers, and even some financial advisors found themselves in demand for their ability to create complicated paper trails. In many cases, they were told only what they needed to know. A sale might be structured through several offshore entities, so no single person could see the full picture. For the cartels, Miami wasn't just a port. It was an international financial hub in the making. Ordinary clubgoers, of course, had little idea. To them, the early 90s felt like an age of glamour. They might notice that a particular table always received special treatment or that certain guests arrived with an unusual level of security, but it seemed like part of the show. Even bartenders and DJs often treated these mysterious high spenders as generous patrons. In a city built on appearances, few questioned the source of all that wealth. Yet the signs were there. Occasionally a deal went bad, and a once thriving club abruptly closed with no explanation. Sometimes shipments of luxury goods disappeared from ports under odd circumstances. Rumors swirled of hidden safes and sudden midnight flights. Local journalists began to hear whispers, but hard proof was elusive. Every time a lead emerged, it seemed to vanish in a fog of offshore accounts and carefully scripted alibis. Meanwhile, the cartels themselves were changing. They weren't only violent networks. Many had evolved into sophisticated business empires. By the early 90s, some leaders preferred quiet investments to open conflict. They sponsored concerts, partnered with fashion brands, and cultivated relationships with influential figures. In their eyes, the Miami club scene wasn't merely entertainment. It was a gateway to legitimacy and global influence. This double life of brilliance and secrecy gave the city its unique tension. The very sparkle that attracted celebrities and tourists also drew those who treated the nightlife as a giant chessboard. Money wasn't just spent. It was moved, hidden, and multiplied. And as those hidden rivers of cash grew stronger, they reshaped the economy, quietly rewriting the rules for everyone from real estate developers to late-night cab drivers. By the mid-90s, Miami had become more than a party capital. It was a financial crossroads where vast fortunes could be disguised as music, fashion, or hospitality. And wherever that much money gathers, new players inevitably appear to guard it, compete for it, and use it to tighten their grip on the city. The next turn of our story takes us right to the heart of that glittering battlefield, the legendary clubs and secret gaming rooms where luxury and underground dealings met face to face. From hidden VIP chambers to private casinos known only to insiders, the stage was set for the next chapter of Miami's intoxicating nightlife. Venues of vice, clubs, and casinos. On a warm Miami night, a single block on South Beach could feel like an entire world. The air shimmered with music. The sidewalks glittered with sequins and gold chains, and luxury cars idled in long, glowing lines. Everyone wanted to be inside the places where the city's heartbeat was loudest. Yet behind the velvet ropes and camera flashes, these clubs and private casinos were more than playgrounds. They were the engines of a shadow economy. Step into one of the legendary nightclubs of the early 90s, and you'd be met by a wave of sound so powerful it seemed to lift the floor. The lighting was hypnotic. Beams of deep blue, sudden flashes of white, 1,000 tiny lights spinning like stars. Bartenders poured endless streams of champagne and cocktails, while dancers filled the room with electric energy. For celebrities and vacationers, these were temples of pure fun. But for certain owners and investors, the dance floor was only half the story. Behind the DJ booth, or hidden in back offices, ledgers told a different tale. Some clubs were structured to blur the line between profit and laundering. One week, a venue might report a record number of VIP bookings. The next, it claimed massive drink sales for private events that no one outside a small circle had ever seen. The numbers created a perfect disguise for cash arriving from far beyond Florida's borders. A night of music and dancing became a convenient way to move millions in secret. Casinos, some licensed, some operating in legal gray zones, added another layer of intrigue. While most Miami residents never set foot inside these rooms, whispers about them drifted through the city. Tucked away in upscale hotels or hidden behind unmarked doors, they attracted high rollers who valued privacy as much as excitement. Here, chips could be bought with cash, winnings collected with few questions asked, and fortunes could change hands under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. For criminal financiers, these places were ideal, elegant, exclusive, and discreet. The people who owned or managed these venues often became local celebrities. They hosted dazzling theme nights, invited international DJs, and were photographed with film stars and athletes. Yet in many cases, the true investors remained invisible. Shell companies and silent partners kept ownership complex and opaque. An ordinary partygoer might believe they were dancing in a world created by bold entrepreneurs, when in fact the design came from distant boardrooms or from figures whose names never appeared on official paperwork. Every club had its own legend. Some were known for marathon dance sessions that lasted until sunrise, others for opulent VIP rooms with custom cocktails and private shows. There were rooftop lounges where the ocean breeze mingled with expensive cigars, and hidden basements where the music grew so loud it felt like stepping inside a heartbeat. These stories fed Miami's international reputation as a place where nightlife had no limits. But limits did exist. They just weren't the ones most visitors imagined. Access often depended on subtle signals, a nod from the right doorman, recognition by a manager, or an invitation whispered over a late-night drink. Within the clubs themselves, special rooms might remain closed to the general crowd. In these private spaces, deals far larger than bar tabs could be made. Some involved real estate or art, others remained pure mystery. The relationships between clubs and their powerful patrons were complex. Successful owners needed protection from competition and unwanted attention. Powerful figures needed reliable partners who could keep secrets and keep profits flowing. This mutual dependence turned certain venues into something closer to private embassies, where unspoken rules mattered more than any city ordinance. On the dance floor, everything looked spontaneous. In the back room, nothing was left to chance. For Miami residents working inside this world, bartenders, security staff, dancers, DJs, the rewards were tempting. Tips could exceed a week's wages in a single night. Yet the pace was relentless and the pressure intense. Everyone knew that one wrong word could mean losing a job or a valuable connection. Silence became part of the professional skill set. By the middle of the decade, the city's most famous clubs were not only entertainment hubs, but also economic engines, feeding an entire network of suppliers, promoters, and investors. Their impact reached far beyond South Beach, shaping neighborhoods and influencing property values. But the higher they climbed, the more attention they attracted from rivals and from those who wanted a share of the profits. And that is where our story turns next. As money and influence concentrated behind these glamorous doors, the struggle for control intensified. Rival groups, each seeking a bigger slice of Miami's booming nightlife economy, began to test each other's strength. The sparkle of the dance floor hid an escalating contest for territory and loyalty, a contest that would soon erupt in open rivalries and tense confrontations. Power behind the velvet rope. The night might start with music and laughter, but behind Miami's velvet ropes, another rhythm pulsed, one of negotiations, favors, and quiet power. Imagine stepping through a crowded club entrance, leaving the humid street behind. The bass thunders, lights swirl, and a packed dance floor stretches ahead. Yet, if you follow a narrow staircase or slip past a curtain, you might find a small room where the music fades and voices lower. This was the real command center of many 90s clubs, where decisions were made that shaped far more than the evening's playlist. By the early 90s, certain organized networks had learned that the hottest venues weren't just about music. They were gateways to influence. Whoever controlled the doors controlled the flow of money, fashion, and connections. Behind the scenes, club owners and powerful backers formed alliances with local figures who could make obstacles disappear. Licenses, inspections, and security details often depended on knowing the right person and knowing them well. These relationships weren't always written down. They were sealed with late-night conversations and shared interests. A silent investor might provide startup capital for a glamorous new lounge. In return, the venue might quietly reserve VIP areas for select guests or allow private deals to unfold out of sight. Some insiders even described the most successful clubs as miniature governments, each with its own internal rules, trusted guards, and carefully chosen gatekeepers. Political connections played a crucial role. City permits could be delayed or approved overnight depending on who made a call. Real estate opportunities often required inside knowledge. The smartest operators understood that charm and persistence were as important as cash. A well-timed donation to a civic event or sponsorship of a cultural festival could open doors that paperwork never would. Within this ecosystem, certain individuals became legendary. They weren't always owners. Sometimes they were promoters, managers, or even longtime doormen whose word carried weight. Their job was to keep the balance, making sure celebrities felt safe, ensuring that money flowed smoothly, and quietly discouraging anyone who threatened that delicate harmony. They might greet guests with a friendly smile, but every gesture carried quiet authority. Meanwhile, organized groups with deeper roots in illicit finance were never far away. Some acted as silent partners, bringing in funds when a club wanted to expand or survive a slow season. Others offered protection, ensuring that no competitor disrupted a profitable weekend. The boundaries between legitimate business and covert backing blurred until even experienced insiders could not always tell where one ended and the other began. This layered power structure also shaped Miami's style. A famous DJ booked for an exclusive residency could draw crowds from across the globe, while a sudden change in management might signal deeper shifts. One night, a club might close for renovations, only to reopen under new leadership with a different crowd and different unwritten rules. Behind each transformation were careful calculations about alliances and profit. For staff and regular patrons, these shifts were part of the excitement. They sensed when something was changing, but rarely knew the full story. A bartender might notice a new group occupying the best tables or a security team growing stricter at the door. Rumors traveled fast, but facts remained elusive. The surface glitter kept everyone guessing. As the decade progressed, competition for control intensified. The nightlife economy was too lucrative to leave unguarded. Established players wanted to keep their dominance. Ambitious newcomers saw opportunities to claim their own corner of the city's fame. Meetings in back rooms grew tenser. Agreements that once seemed firm began to crack under pressure from rising profits and growing egos. Yet the music never stopped. For the thousands who flocked to South Beach each weekend, the clubs still offered pure escape, a place where sunrise might find them dancing with strangers and forgetting the outside world. Few realized that every beat they moved to echoed with the quiet maneuvers of people negotiating influence and wealth. But fragile alliances rarely last forever. As profits soared and new competitors entered the scene, patience thinned and tempers shortened. Behind the velvet rope, small disputes sharpened into open conflicts. The stage was set for the next dramatic turn, when rivalries and hidden ambitions would spill into the spotlight and reshape Miami's nightlife in ways that could no longer be ignored. Rivalries and turf wars. The summer heat in Miami could feel endless, heavy with salt and neon. But in the mid-90s, there was a different kind of pressure rising, a silent tension that followed promoters, club owners, and hidden investors like a second shadow. Out on Ocean Drive, the parties looked perfect. Endless music, champagne pyramids, famous faces. Yet inside private offices and late-night meeting rooms, a storm was brewing. The struggle for control of Miami's nightlife had begun to boil over. It started quietly. A new club might open with an ambitious theme and suddenly draw the crowds that once belonged to a rival venue. Another promoter might land an international DJ who used to spin elsewhere. At first, it seemed like normal business competition. But in a city where certain backers expected loyalty and long-term payback, these moves were rarely innocent. Every packed dance floor meant more money flowing through bars, VIP lounges, and hidden cash channels. Whoever captured those flows captured power. Behind the flashing lights, silent partners began to clash. Some were linked to long-standing local groups. Others came from far beyond Florida, bringing their own ambitions and muscle. For years they had cooperated, keeping the peace in exchange for shared profits. Now that understanding was cracking. Disputes over door policies or bar contracts became arguments about territory and influence. When persuasion failed, subtle intimidation stepped in, the kind that arrived as a sudden inspection, a broken supply line, or a mysterious delay in city permits. People inside the industry felt the shift. Bartenders noticed when a familiar security team was suddenly replaced. DJs sensed when a once welcoming club grew tense, its management whispering in corners. Even regular guests sometimes caught the change, A favorite venue closed for renovations with little warning, or a beloved weekly party vanished overnight. To outsiders, it looked like chance. Insiders knew better. Each disappearance was a move on a hidden chessboard. As competition sharpened, so did the tactics. Promoters competed fiercely for headline performers, sometimes offering impossible sums to lure them from rival clubs. Exclusive drink contracts were negotiated like international treaties. And always in the background were those discreet investors, quietly funding expansions or threatening to pull support if their terms weren't met. A single missed payment or broken promise could ripple through the scene, toppling relationships built over years. Occasionally, the tension broke into view. A sudden scuffle at a grand opening, a late-night raid prompted by an anonymous tip, a fire inspection that forced an unexpected closure. Each incident added to the rumor mill. Local newspapers hinted at deeper struggles, but rarely had proof. What everyone sensed was that the stakes were far higher than the price of cocktails or the pride of a few promoters. The city itself felt the consequences. Police were called to more disturbances near nightlife hubs. Residents complained about noise and crowds, giving officials new reasons to tighten permits. Meanwhile, real estate developers watched closely, knowing that the fate of a single famous club could sway the value of an entire block. Every action inside the nightlife sphere rippled through Miami's broader economy. Yet for all the friction, the party on the surface continued. Weekend after weekend, music thundered and dancers filled the floors. Tourists and celebrities flew in, rarely aware of the negotiations happening a few doors away. That contrast, dazzling calm above, strategic conflict below, became part of Miami's unique allure. It was a city where pleasure never paused, even when powerful forces wrestled in the shadows. By the late 90s, the network of rivalries had reshaped the scene. Some clubs rose to legendary status. Others disappeared almost without a trace. Friendships that once seemed unbreakable turned into silent standoffs. What had begun as cooperation for mutual profit was now an unpredictable contest for dominance. Still, the nightlife machine kept spinning, feeding on ambition and spectacle. But the cracks were widening. Investigators were beginning to notice patterns in sudden closures and unexplained profits. Journalists were collecting stories that hinted at more than simple business disputes. The quiet battles for territory were about to draw new attention from city officials, federal agents, and a curious public eager to know what truly powered Miami's endless night. And so, the story moves forward, from secret rivalries to the wider world of scandal and corruption that would soon place Miami's most glamorous addresses under an unforgiving spotlight. Glamour's underbelly, scandal, and corruption. Miami's night sky in the late 90s still blazed with color. Pink hotel facades lit by strobes, endless strings of headlights along the causeways, dance beats rolling across the ocean air. From the outside, nothing had changed. Clubs pulsed with music until dawn. Celebrities toasted each other in hidden lounges, and vacationers spoke of the city as a paradise of freedom. Yet beneath that glamorous skin, the foundation was cracking. Whispers of corruption were growing louder, and the glow of success began to cast long, uneasy shadows. The first hints came as rumors. A well-known club suddenly closed for renovations, but insiders said unpaid debts or a quiet investigation forced the doors shut. A popular promoter vanished from the scene, leaving behind only questions. Longtime bartenders traded stories of briefcases exchanged in back offices, of cash counted at dawn with no receipts in sight. What used to be playful gossip started to feel like a map of something bigger and far riskier. Law enforcement faced a challenge unlike anything they had known. The nightlife economy was a complex maze of partnerships, shell companies, and offshore accounts. Each time investigators followed a trail, it seemed to dissolve into a fog of paperwork. Some clubs operated under multiple business names, with sudden transfers of ownership that made it hard to know who truly held the reins. Auditors could examine one set of ledgers, while another, more accurate and far more interesting, remained hidden behind locked cabinets or encrypted files. Corruption added another twist. A few local officials and inspectors were accused of looking the other way when they should have been enforcing rules. A club that technically violated zoning limits might stay open if the right donation found the right pocket. Building permits appeared overnight. Fire inspections passed, even when alarms mysteriously failed. Most city workers were honest, but a small number of compromised players could tilt the balance in a place where fortunes were made each weekend. Journalists and television crews sensed a story. Tabloids printed dramatic headlines about Miami's double life, while investigative reporters dug into property records and court filings. Sometimes they uncovered hard evidence, unexplained cash purchases of multi-million-dollar homes, or links between club investors and known criminal networks overseas. Other times they found only fragments, late-night meetings, offshore corporations with poetic names, sudden wire transfers that stopped just short of illegality. Each discovery fueled public fascination and deepened the mystery. For the people working inside the clubs, the tension became impossible to ignore. Security teams grew stricter, not only checking for rowdy guests, but also watching for cameras and undercover visitors. Bartenders whispered about federal agents in plain clothes mingling with the crowd. Some employees quietly left, fearing that a simple paycheck might draw them into legal trouble. Others stayed, calculating that the rewards still outweighed the risk, at least for now. Amid this growing unease, betrayals unfolded. A trusted manager might cooperate with investigators in exchange for a lighter sentence. A promoter under pressure from tax authorities might reveal the details of secret partnerships. Each confession set off ripples, forcing once friendly associates to guard their words and double-check their accounts. Trust, which had once bound the nightlife empire together, began to erode. Despite the deepening cracks, the spectacle continued. Big-name DJs kept arriving. Champagne still flowed, and tourists rarely sensed the turmoil. If anything, the whisper of danger made Miami even more attractive to thrill-seekers who loved the idea of dancing where rumors of high stakes lingered in the air. The city's marketing machine leaned on images of tropical nights and endless freedom, even as investigators worked quietly a few blocks away. By the late 90s, the pattern was impossible to hide. Too many unexplained closures, too many sudden disappearances. Federal agencies started to coordinate with local police, sharing intelligence and planning operations. Undercover work grew bolder, with agents posing as investors or staff. Each step brought them closer to the intricate web of shell companies and hidden financiers that had turned Miami's nightlife into a giant, glittering puzzle. Yet even as the pressure built, the people at the heart of the scene held their ground. Some believed they were untouchable. Others were simply addicted to the adrenaline of high profits and high living. Every weekend still promised packed dance floors and record receipts, and no one wanted to admit that the music might stop. The tension reached a point where something had to give. Investigators were ready, the press was circling, and even loyal insiders began to wonder how long the show could go on. From this charged atmosphere, the story moves naturally to its next turn, the moment when patience ran out and law enforcement made its most decisive moves. The long arm of the law was about to reach into the heart of Miami's nightlife, bringing the secret world of glamour and hidden money under a sudden, blinding light. Law's long arm. Investigations begin. The nights still glittered, but a new kind of spotlight was beginning to shine on Miami. By the late 90s, the quiet rumors of hidden fortunes and whispered alliances had grown too loud to ignore. Federal agents, city police, and financial investigators were no longer watching from the sidelines. They were stepping directly onto the dance floor, sometimes literally, determined to find out what was really happening behind those famous velvet ropes. It started with small, patient moves. An unfamiliar face at the bar might be more than a tourist. It could be an undercover agent listening carefully. A new regular in the VIP section might in fact be part of a financial crimes team, tracking cash flow with subtle questions and quiet observations. To ordinary guests, these strangers blended seamlessly with the crowd. To investigators, each night was a new chance to follow the money. The challenge was immense. Miami's nightlife economy ran on layers of companies and quicksilver transactions. Cash came in fast and left faster, transformed into renovations, private parties, or offshore investments. A club could appear to earn millions in drink sales while quietly acting as a channel for far larger sums. Detectives had to untangle complex chains of ownership, often stretching across continents. Some trails led to shell corporations with poetic names registered on distant islands, designed to disappear from view at a moment's notice. Wiretaps and surveillance became essential tools. With court approval, teams monitored phone calls, recorded late-night meetings, and documented financial transfers. Each scrap of data was a clue. A sudden shift in inventory orders, an odd pattern of payments to a security firm, or a manager's call to a number linked to known criminal enterprises. Investigators worked in silence, letting months pass as they mapped relationships and built their cases. Meanwhile, the nightlife scene carried on as if nothing had changed. Dancers still filled the clubs, and famous DJs still flew in for marathon sets. To most patrons, the only sign of something unusual was the occasional unannounced inspection, or the subtle presence of new faces among the crowd. But inside government offices, large boards filled with photographs and flowcharts told a very different story. Each club, promoter, and financier was a node in a growing web of connections that pointed toward organized financial crime. Financial experts joined the effort. Accountants and specialists in international banking traced wire transfers and compared them with customs records, real estate sales, and tax filings. They looked for mismatches, a lounge claiming record profits but paying surprisingly low utilities, or a company buying expensive property while reporting modest income. Even small inconsistencies could open the door to larger revelations. Occasionally, the investigations surfaced in public. A dramatic late-night raid on a well-known club made headlines, shocking tourists and locals alike. In some cases, owners were taken in for questioning, while guests were still on the dance floor. Elsewhere, quiet subpoenas required banks and businesses to turn over documents. One by one, the protective layers that shielded hidden investors began to peel away. Not every operation succeeded immediately. Some suspects vanished before arrests could be made, leaving only closed offices and cancelled leases. Others hired skilled lawyers who delayed cases for years. But each step tightened the net. By sharing intelligence across federal and local agencies, investigators built stronger cases that could withstand even the most determined legal defenses. For employees and regulars, these developments created a strange tension. Many simply wanted to keep their jobs and enjoy the nightlife, but sudden closures or surprise questioning made it clear that something larger was unfolding. Conversations at staff meetings turned cautious. Some workers quietly cooperated with authorities, offering inside details in exchange for protection or lighter treatment. Others stayed silent, unsure whom to trust. The city, too, began to change. Headlines about financial crimes and hidden ownership sparked debates about Miami's image. Local leaders worried about tourism and investment, yet they also recognized that failing to act could damage the city even more. New committees formed to consider tighter regulations, and public hearings drew crowds eager to hear how deep the investigation would go. By the turn of the millennium, the combined pressure of legal action, financial scrutiny, and media attention reached a tipping point. High-profile arrests made the evening news. Courts froze bank accounts linked to suspicious operations. The once carefree world of late-night glamour now stood face-to-face with subpoenas and indictments. Still, for every venue forced to shut its doors, others tried to carry on, hoping the storm would pass. But the city had changed. The myth of untouchable nightlife was gone, replaced by the reality of courtroom battles and detailed audits. The next chapter of Miami's story would no longer be about who could throw the best party. It would be about who could survive the fallout. From this turning point, the path leads naturally to the people and places that bore the weight of these revelations. The following chapter looks at those dramatic downfalls. Once celebrated clubs and charismatic figures brought low when the law finally caught up with Miami's most dazzling dream. Fall from grace. Downfall of nightlife icons. The sound of music still spilled out onto Ocean Drive, but something essential had changed. By the late 90s, Miami's legendary nightlife no longer felt untouchable. Federal raids, sealed indictments, and quiet but relentless financial probes had pierced the glamour. For the first time in years, the question on everyone's lips wasn't where to dance, but who would fall next. The first big closures stunned the city. A world-famous club might finish a crowded Saturday night only to find its doors locked by Monday. Patrons arriving for the next event were met with official notices and uniformed officers. The shock rippled across South Beach. How could a venue packed with celebrities and cash one night be under investigation the next? For many locals, it felt as though a favorite character in a long-running play had suddenly vanished mid-scene. Behind those abrupt endings were complex legal and financial storms. Investigators revealed secret investors, falsified accounting, and vast unexplained cash flows. Once friendly landlords demanded back rent. Banks froze accounts linked to offshore companies. Managers who had seemed like permanent fixtures disappeared, sometimes leaving only a single voicemail saying they were traveling for business. What looked like a sudden collapse was usually the final act of a process that had been building quietly for years. For some owners and promoters, the pressure was personal and immediate. Court documents told stories of sleepless nights, last-minute negotiations, and desperate searches for allies. A few tried to rebrand their venues under new names, hoping to escape the spotlight. Others attempted to shift operations to different cities, chasing a fresh start. But the network of federal investigations was wide, and moving often only drew more attention. Famous personalities who had defined Miami's nightlife also faced the fallout. A charismatic club host, known for welcoming movie stars, might find themselves called to testify. A well-loved DJ discovered that years of cash payments raised questions from tax authorities. Even those never charged found their reputations reshaped overnight. Invitations dried up, sponsors hesitated, and once busy phones stayed silent. Celebrities and international guests reacted swiftly. Some cancelled appearances, worried their names might be linked to legal trouble. Others stayed away until the dust settled. The sudden quiet inside previously packed clubs was striking. Where music and conversation once roared until dawn, there were now darkened dance floors and echoes of a city in transition. Yet Miami's story was never only about the famous. Thousands of ordinary workers felt the impact. Bartenders, servers, security staff, and local performers lost jobs as clubs shut down. Small businesses that depended on nightlife, from late-night eateries to boutique fashion shops, saw sales fall. For many, the glamour that had drawn them to Miami turned overnight into uncertainty and unpaid bills. Still, amid the losses, a few figures found unexpected paths forward. Some club owners cooperated with investigators, sharing information in exchange for lighter penalties. A handful reinvented themselves as legitimate entrepreneurs, using lessons learned to build restaurants, hotels, or music labels with cleaner finances. For them, survival meant transformation. The wider city also began to adjust. Local government, wary of repeating past mistakes, introduced stricter licensing rules and closer financial monitoring. New partnerships between law enforcement and business groups aimed to keep future ventures transparent. These efforts signaled that Miami intended not just to punish the past, but to reshape the way nightlife and big money could mix. Despite the upheaval, the spirit of celebration didn't vanish. Miami's identity had always been tied to music, ocean breezes, and the pleasure of late-night gatherings. But the tone changed. Parties became more carefully planned. Investors sought clearer records and stronger compliance. The wild freedom of the early 90s gave way to a more measured rhythm. By the early 2000s, the city's glittering nightlife map looked entirely different. Some iconic spaces stood empty, their neon signs fading in the sun. Others reopened under new management, eager to prove that a fresh era had begun. For visitors arriving years later, it might seem as though nothing had happened. But for those who remembered the old days, every quiet doorway told a story of ambition, risk, and the high price of unchecked glamour. And yet, endings often plant seeds for renewal. As the most famous clubs fell and legal battles wound through the courts, a younger generation of entrepreneurs saw an opening. They envisioned venues that would carry Miami forward without repeating the chaos of the past. In the next chapter, we watch the city pivot from scandal to innovation, transforming its nightlife and identity for a new century while still carrying echoes of everything that came before. Rebirth and reinvention. When the dust of investigations finally began to settle, Miami faced a choice. Let the party fade into memory or find a new way to celebrate. The city chose reinvention. By the early 2000s, construction cranes dotted the skyline, and the nightlife map was being redrawn. South Beach, once the symbol of unchecked indulgence, prepared for a fresh chapter built on creativity, style, and a more deliberate kind of luxury. At first, the change felt subtle. Former hotspots reopened with redesigned interiors, boasting airy spaces and modern sound systems. New owners talked about transparency and solid accounting. City leaders introduced clearer licensing rules and tighter financial checks. Investors now expected detailed business plans, not just charm and a handshake. For club-goers, the result was still glamorous. Plush lounges, dazzling light shows, and internationally known DJs. But the mood carried a quieter confidence. The wild gamble of the early 90s had given way to careful planning. Music helped lead the transformation. Electronic dance music, already popular, found a more permanent home in Miami with the rise of annual festivals and outdoor events. At the same time, hip-hop and Latin pop gained strength, reflecting the city's deep cultural mix. Live performances and DJ residencies turned clubs into creative stages rather than mere cash machines. Partying was still at the center, but it now came wrapped in the language of art and global culture. Architecture followed suit. Developers restored classic Art Deco hotels and built sleek new towers that combined restaurants, galleries, and performance spaces. Rooftop bars offered panoramic views where visitors could watch the ocean turn silver under moonlight. Instead of hiding private rooms behind heavy curtains, many venues celebrated openness, with glass walls and terraces that blurred the line between indoors and out. Transparency became both a design choice and a statement of values. A younger generation of entrepreneurs embraced these trends. Many had grown up watching the excesses of the past and wanted something different, experiences that felt both cutting-edge and sustainable. They sought partnerships with local artists, culinary innovators, and environmental designers. Some even integrated wellness concepts, offering sunrise yoga sessions on the same rooftops where late-night dance parties had unfolded hours earlier. The result was a nightlife that invited more kinds of people and told a richer story about the city. Tourism responded with enthusiasm. International travelers, once drawn mainly by tales of wild nights, now came for food festivals, art fairs, and music events that lasted for days. Families discovered daytime attractions, while young professionals flew in for a long weekend that balanced parties with culture and beach relaxation. Miami remained exciting, but became more versatile, able to attract visitors who might once have stayed away. For long-time residents and workers, this rebirth meant steadier opportunities. Jobs in hospitality, design, and event planning grew alongside traditional club work. Paychecks were more reliable, and the risk of sudden closures diminished. The city's economy diversified, with nightlife complementing, rather than dominating, other sectors like art, technology, and international trade. Of course, not everything changed overnight. Some hidden dealings lingered, and a few venues still flirted with the shadows. But the balance shifted decisively. City enforcement gained stronger tools, and community groups kept closer watch. Even when problems surfaced, they were addressed faster and more openly than in the past. This period of reinvention gave Miami a new confidence. No longer defined solely by neon excess, the city positioned itself as a global creative capital. Major art events like Art Basel found a natural home here, blending visual spectacle with music and design. Restaurants earned international awards, and music producers from every genre discovered Miami as a collaborative hub. Yet the echoes of the old days never fully disappeared. Stories of the wild 90s remained part of the city's identity, retold in documentaries, novels, and late-night conversations. For many, they served as both a caution and a reminder of the energy that had built modern Miami. The same restless spirit that once fueled excess now fueled innovation. By the mid-2000s, visitors arriving for the first time might have seen only the polished present. Elegant lounges, world-class art, a skyline glowing with new towers. But for those who remembered, every stretch of Ocean Drive carried memories of past glory and past mistakes. The city had not erased its history. It had woven that history into a stronger, more resilient fabric. This renewal set the stage for the final act of our journey. As Miami stepped confidently into a new century, it also began to look back, asking what lessons the turbulent 90s had left behind. In the next chapter, we'll explore how those unforgettable years continue to shape the city's identity, its culture, and the way it understands the delicate dance between luxury and temptation. Legacy of the 90s. What remains? Walk through Miami today, and you'll still feel the heartbeat of the 90s beneath the modern skyline. The pastel Art Deco facades of South Beach glow as brightly as ever, and music drifts from rooftop lounges and bayside stages. Yet every polished corner carries echoes of the decade when glamour and hidden ambition redefined the city. To understand today's Miami, its confidence, its creativity, and even its caution, you have to see how the wild years left their mark. The first and most visible legacy is cultural. The 90s proved that Miami could set trends for the world. Global music festivals, high-fashion shoots, and film productions discovered the city during those hectic nights, and they never really left. Today's electronic dance scene, hip-hop collaborations, and Latin pop explosions all trace lines back to those formative clubs and the DJs who dared to blend sounds in bold, new ways. Many of the producers who headline today's festivals first found their footing in the experimental atmosphere of that era. Architecture and design also bear the imprint. The rescue and revival of the Art Deco district in the 90s laid the groundwork for Miami's unique mix of historic charm and futuristic glass towers. Developers who once learned the hard lessons of sudden booms and busts now build with a longer view, creating spaces meant to last and to adapt. Rooftop gardens, light-filled atriums, and walkable plazas grew from a desire to celebrate openness after years when secrecy ruled. The city's economy learned powerful lessons too. After seeing how unchecked cash flow could distort entire neighborhoods, Miami tightened its financial practices. Transparent ownership, clearer permits, and stronger auditing became the norm. While challenges remain, the old assumption that clubs could operate in a twilight zone of hidden investors no longer stands. Business leaders who grew up during the 90s understand that true success depends on reputation as much as on revenue. Socially, the period left a double memory: excitement and caution. Many Miami families still share stories of the glamorous nights that put the city on the world map. But they also remember how quickly fortunes vanished when investigations struck. That awareness shapes how locals think about opportunity today. They embrace creativity and celebration, but they value accountability and community oversight in a way that once seemed unnecessary. Even the city's approach to tourism reflects the lessons of those years. Modern marketing highlights not just beaches and nightlife, but also art, cuisine, and family-friendly activities. Miami still welcomes visitors who want to dance until sunrise, but it also invites those seeking culture and natural beauty. The destination is bigger, more varied, and ultimately more resilient than the single-focus party image that dominated the 90s. Perhaps the most intriguing legacy is psychological. The decade left Miami with a sense of both daring and self-awareness. Residents know their city can reinvent itself because they watched it happen. They also know how fragile glamour can be when rules are ignored. This dual memory drives a creative tension. Miami celebrates bold visions while keeping an eye on the structures that protect its future. For artists and storytellers, the 90s remain a treasure trove. Documentaries, novels, and music videos revisit those neon-lit streets, exploring the mix of joy and danger that defined the time. Younger generations, who never set foot in the legendary clubs, still feel connected through these cultural echoes. The stories become a shared inheritance, part cautionary tale, part inspiration. Today, when a new club opens with state-of-the-art sound or a festival transforms the waterfront, there is always a quiet nod to the past. Promoters remember that the most thrilling nights are the ones that can stand the test of daylight. Investors plan with transparency, knowing that long-term success depends on trust. The city's resilience, its ability to transform challenges into creativity, is itself a gift from the decade of extremes. As the sun sets and Miami's lights begin to sparkle, it's easy to imagine the 90s are still alive somewhere in the rhythm of the streets. They are, but transformed. The same spirit that once fueled reckless ambition now drives art, music, and innovation. The lesson endures. Glamour can dazzle, but true greatness grows when a city learns from its own wildest stories. With this reflection on what the 90s left behind, our journey turns toward its final insight. Beyond the culture, beyond the skyline, lies the human side. The lives changed, the prices paid, and the deeper cost of a decade when luxury and hidden power dance so closely together. In the next chapter, we look straight at those lasting consequences and the quiet truths they reveal. Reflections. The hidden cost. Miami's skyline at sunset still blazes with color, and its nightlife hums with music and laughter. But behind the glow lies a quieter story, the enduring cost of the decade when luxury and hidden power shared the same dance floor. To see the full picture of the 90s, we have to look past the champagne towers and velvet ropes and listen to the lives shaped and sometimes scarred by those wild years. For many individuals, the price was deeply personal. Bartenders, dancers, and young dreamers arrived in Miami, hoping to build a future in a city of endless opportunity. Some found brief success, but later faced sudden unemployment when a club collapsed under investigation. Others struggled with the pressure of late nights and constant temptation, leaving them exhausted or entangled in debts they never expected. What began as a season of excitement could turn into years of rebuilding. Families also felt the ripple. Behind every celebrated entrepreneur or famous promoter were parents, siblings, and children, navigating sudden wealth followed by sudden loss. Court cases, unexpected legal fees, and long absences strained relationships. For some, the memories of those glamorous nights now carry a bittersweet edge, stories told with pride and regret in equal measure. The city itself paid a collective cost. When investigations exposed hidden investors and fraudulent accounts, Miami faced skeptical headlines around the world. Tourists hesitated, and some businesses struggled. Cleaning up required millions of dollars in new oversight, stronger policing, and careful rebuilding of public trust. These investments strengthened Miami in the long run, but demanded sacrifice and patience from residents and honest entrepreneurs. There was also a moral toll, harder to measure, but deeply felt. The 90s tested the boundaries of law and conscience. People who had never thought of themselves as rule breakers found themselves ignoring small red flags, a payment that arrived in cash, a shipment with vague paperwork, because they believed everyone else was doing the same. Over time, those quiet compromises reshaped the city's sense of right and wrong, leaving a cautionary lesson that still echoes today. Yet the hidden cost is not only about loss, it is also about transformation. Many who lived through the era speak of how it sharpened their values. They learned the importance of transparency, of building businesses that could withstand scrutiny, of celebrating music and art without risking everything to shadowy deals. The very pressure of those years forged a deeper understanding of what lasting success requires. The city's cultural memory holds these lessons in creative ways. Documentaries, novels, and oral histories revisit the decade with both fascination and honesty. Community festivals honor the music and art born in that period, while also remembering those who struggled. Even Miami's modern nightlife, vibrant yet more accountable, reflects an unspoken agreement to balance thrill with responsibility. On a broader scale, the 90s left Miami with a resilient identity. The city learned how to rise after setbacks, to reinvent itself without forgetting its roots. That resilience now draws entrepreneurs, artists, and travelers who see Miami not only as a place to party, but also as a place to build lasting dreams. The very challenges of the past became the foundation for a more mature kind of brilliance. As night falls and the city lights shimmer on the water, it's tempting to believe the story of the 90s is complete. In truth, it lives on, in the music that fills today's clubs, in the architecture that mixes history and modern style, and in the cautious optimism of those who plan Miami's future. The decade's hidden cost is also its hidden gift, the wisdom to pursue beauty and excitement while guarding the human heart and the public trust. And so our journey comes full circle, from neon-lit beginnings to secret dealings, from dramatic falls to creative rebirth. The saga of Miami's 90s nightlife reveals more than a glamorous past. It shows how a city can transform risk into resilience, how lessons learned in the shadows can guide the brightest lights. The music still plays, but now it carries the depth of everything Miami has lived, lost, and learned.